Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to move on to our first in-house session. Well, it's actually a hybrid session. We're going to be talking about rethinking government communication. I'm going to hand over the floor to a person who is a master communicator, much better than I am. Ambassador Murat Karagöz is the General Director of Information for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Turkey. Ambassador Karagöz, the floor is yours. I invite you and your panelists up to the stage, please.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Murat Karagöz. As Alican Ayandar said, I'm the Director General of Communications at the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'll be more than happy to moderate this panel today afternoon. This will be actually the first panel. As Alican Bey said, it will be in hybrid format. I have 2 panelists next to me, and 3 will be connected online VTC. Our panel's topic today is quite a challenging one, but I have a stunning group of experts to make our session both informative and enjoyable. I'm sure that at the end of the session, you will be able to get a lot of inputs and takes to your further studies. You will have a chance to compare the performances of various stakeholders, from Russia to EU, from Latvia to Estonia to Kosovo, and from my side a little bit from Turkey as well, of course. COVID-19 pandemic created huge global impacts from healthcare system to economy, education, tourism, culture, and transportation. Pandemic was, definitely is, and probably will be critical for more than ever for governments to reach out to their citizens feeling under threat. So it is a big challenge for the time being to the governments. No one can deny this. This tough period tests governments' communication skills. As for the international aspect, many nations either failed or were slow to establish effective cooperation and coordination with other nations. But today, I hope that we will be hearing also some best practices in communication skills during this tough period. As for Turkey, especially from the foreign policy perspective, I guess it is worth to mention 3 points. Actually, I may call it achievements or earnings, which were directly also linked to the government communication. Number 1, success in evacuation. You know that, more than 100,000 Turkish nationals were evacuated or brought back home from 143 countries. Also, around 38,000 foreigners from 91 countries repatriated from Turkey under extensive travel and border restrictions. This definitely required a successful communication skills, and this also required a very successful coordination among various agencies in the state. Number 2, generosity in international cooperation. Turkey helped 160 countries and 12 international organizations since outbreak of the pandemic, for one or another way. And Turkey also provided over 1.7 million vaccines doses to 12 countries. I guess this is also an important commitment of Turkey, but also a success for government communication. And last but not least, of course, a strong desire for multilateralism and consultation. And please let me here also to highlight the great importance of Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Because countries, individuals, institutions fell apart during this period. But diplomacy means talk. We needed to talk each other, sit together and talk each other. If we cannot sit in the one room in small hall, we were connected through Zoom or VTC as we've been doing, but that was quite essential. So from that perspective, actually, as one of the 3 initiatives of Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu, we this year, last summer, actually initiated Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Antalya Diplomacy Forum is a high-level gathering and professionals who deal with diplomacy. Last year, actually this year, last summer in Antalya, we were able to gather, during these heavy conditions of pandemic, 10 heads of state and government, 45 foreign ministers, so which means 1/4 of every nation foreign minister ended up in Antalya. 60 international organization representatives, opinion makers, media representatives, business circles. So they get together, sit together. We discuss the common concerns of regional and international issues. This year it was successful because last year it was successful because we were able to gather 2,000 people in one big congress hall in Antalya, taking into account very strict health measures, and thanks God nothing happened. And this year it will happen in March, this time under the title of Recoding Diplomacy, quite a challenging part. And with that, actually, I will turn to my panel right now. The first panelist, actually, will be sitting on the stage, at the end of the stage, Eero Raun. Eero Raun is from Estonia. He has a remarkable career, wonderful combination of music, public relations, and communications. And currently, he is the CEO of Ford Theater Company. Worked beginning of this year as communication director for Prime Minister's office, or State Chancellery, if I'm not wrong, about 5 to 6 months he conducted this job. And he had also PhD studies in very famous Tartu University, and he worked also for a while as the board member of Estonia Institute. So, without further ado, I jump directly, Eero, if you don't mind. May I ask, to what extent Estonian government's communication efforts were effective since the outbreak of the pandemic?
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador. And I do agree with you that it's really very important to sit down at the same room in person together to keep the relations very strong. And I would like to thank the organizers, the Directorate of Communications, for invitation, for the brilliant arrangements you have made in a really very last minute and a short time. I can bring you some observations from Estonia. Yeah, definitely I was very sad to see in March 2020 how quickly and easily the Schengen regime ceased to function because of the rapid growth of the pandemics. And actually the free movement of people and goods as the basic principles of EU were severely disturbed. But my most positive impression has been to follow that after this short period of confusion, the European Commission has been really able to work for supplying the European citizens with vaccines and also to relieve, I should say, the anxiety and fragmentation of politics within the member states sometimes. So EU has proved its necessity once again. Focusing on my native country, Estonia has gone through 3 major waves of pandemics. The first one, in March and April last year, brought the establishment of a state of emergency. So you see, the streets, schools and offices were all empty, people were afraid of each other, and the economy got seriously hit. Political decision makers did not know the new disease, as we all did not know, and they agreed to pay a large amount of compensations for private companies. And this phase ended in strong solidarity among the whole nation and will to get over all the consequences of the pandemics. The second wave, with its peak in March this year, happened shortly after the exchange of government in Estonia. Therefore, it took away a significant amount of trust on behalf of citizens towards the new government. There were no more state of emergency declared, no more compensations paid, and not enough vaccines for people. Domestic political tensions, therefore, got extremely high. And by the way, Estonia at that time was led by 2 female leaders, both president and prime minister, and they were really personally strong to survive this strong turmoil. And the third wave came from its sharp just a month ago, right after the presidential elections and exactly during the local elections. So schools now are being kept open as much as possible, and so the economy. We have now plenty of vaccines, but not enough people willing to give the injections, so about 40% of population is still not fully vaccinated, and definitely it's too much. You see, as always, freedom of expression has at least two sides, if not more. There are small but strongly resistance-minded target groups who share their belief in conspiracy theories and alternative truth. Major news channels try to keep the balanced line, but you know the power of social media. It always remains independent, and it might do harm a lot for the ordinary people. Estonians are currently proud of very good results of economic growth, but are worried about possible coming crisis in the economy and about new versions of virus as well. So, what are the lessons to learn concerning also strategic communication? First, if people outside our area talk about communication, it can be interpreted as euphemism. Actually, there is a talk about maybe leadership on the different levels. So lack of communication often means growth of distrust as a result of weak management. Second, we need to learn more to combine the efforts of public and private sector. The crisis regulation needs to use and trust the professionals. One of the best decisions made by Estonian government was to invite the most experienced scientists knowing the viruses and human behavior all together to join a scientific council. And this council has given the best possible advice about vaccination and needful restrictions to the government, and helped also to answer the crucial question, why, to the journalists and the rest of society. So there is always a need for more proactive management of expectations of the people, as poorly reactive management style following the assumptions of citizens might be a dead end. We will have continuously hard challenges in front of us, in front of the governments, in the future as well. And their duty is to build more trust in a wider scale to solve these problems. So strategic management, strategic communication can help a lot if it can be always precise, fresh, and I should say also open-minded.
Eero, thank you so much. Thank you for this candid response. The next speaker online is Mr. Vladimir Gushchin from Russia. We will go online to Moscow. Vladimir Gushchin is the Chief Communications Officer at the Center for Strategic Research. He has communications professional focused on international relations and public affairs. He is an experienced consultant to state authorities, NGOs, and big business. And he also enjoys profound expertise in the market access and strategic communication issues, and particularly on Russia and CIS. And now, Vladimir, if I may, how do you evaluate Russian government's communication skills during the pandemic period?
Okey, merhaba Sayın Büyükelçi ve değerli misafirler. I hope that it all sounds good. Greetings from Moscow, and thanks a lot to you for this opportunity to take part in the event. So I would like to share some experience from my side in this field. So, Your Excellency, dear guests, when you are talking about strategic communications and government communications in Russia, you should take into account the peculiarities of government politics and understand the structure of government activities at the moment. As you said already, the pandemic is not over yet, and we are all fighting with new types of the coronavirus. Therefore, we see that because of these and other issues, transformation of government communications in Russia is underway, and it has become nearly permanent. Moreover, this process is stimulated by a deep restructuring of the economy itself, some global issues, and of course digitalization that is going on. As you probably know, the state in Russia has always played an important role in maintaining social stability and economic growth. It also, right now, it's the heart of the social economic environment in the country. And those shifts that have emerged because of the pandemic affect business climate in the country dramatically. It's trade, imports, and exports. The government now proceeds from the need to support businesses that have suffered a lot from disruption of many chains and reduction or dramatic changes in consumption. So it aims to start the process of energy transition and stimulate further digitalization of various fields, including government services for population. And if we talk about the structure of the state, you should understand that the government has done a lot to set up a community of NGOs and even big businesses to involve all those structures in solving problems that have emerged in the pandemic period. And frankly speaking, so these tactics have turned rather efficient, because since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, a lot has been done for promotion of vaccination, for small and medium businesses to get that support from the government in various fields. So I think that the government efficiency is rather high at the moment, but we still have a long way to go to fight this even skepticism among people that is still spread despite so those huge information flows and streams. So that's it, Mr. Ambassador.
Vladimir, thank you so much for this candid answer. Actually, I see your face in the screens in front of me, but I wonder whether the audience can watch you here in the screens. I guess that the other two panelists' picture could be seen, but nevertheless, it was well understood, and our hearts were in Moscow. Maybe in the second round, the technical team will be able to reflect your picture here as well. Now, the third speaker will be Mr. Lutz Güllner from the European Union. Again, another splendid career. He is the head of division at the Strategic Communications at the European External Action Service, EEAC. He assumed important posts within the European Commission. For a while, I believe between 2009 and 10, he also acted as spokesperson of Catherine Ashton. And his work focuses on addressing disinformation threats for the EU and its neighboring region, which we address today, especially during the keynote speech of Professor Fahrettin Altun today. So, if I may, Lutz, EU widely criticized for being slow in responding to COVID crisis. Please correct me if I'm wrong. What could EU do better in communicating its efforts to cope with the pandemic? And to what extent criticisms targeting EU were part of a disinformation campaign?
Merhaba and good morning from Brussels to all of you, and thank you very much, Murat. I think this crisis has shown us one key takeaway, and that is that political communication is changing, and not only political communication. There has been for a long time this saying about do good and talk about it, which is very much the idea of any PR company, but this has changed now. It's not anymore do good and talk about it, but it's reflect before you do something and talk about it before you do something. So this point that Yannis Sarts just made about the mindset, the Stratcom mindset, is really, really crucial to integrate it also in political communications at the very beginning of the process, not at the end to sell something. I think this is something that a lot of, in particular on the government side, people have still to internalize, that a lot of our political agenda points will depend on how we build in the information environment. And there are lots of opportunities. I'm not mentioning all of them, but if you see how we have started to learn also from this crisis in terms of vaccination rates, for example, in terms of how we engage with in the international sphere with our partners, many issues here. But there is, of course, also a major risk in this, and Yanis has eloquently referred to this. In my view, the risk is not just a communication challenge. The risk is bigger. It can have an impact on the entire society, and it can have real life impact as well. And I think especially during the crisis, during the health crisis, we have seen that the manipulation and disinformation can actually lead to real impact, to death, to something substantial. So it's not an esoteric issue. And we need to understand this, and we need to factor this in. In my view, there are 4 points that we need to do to deal with this, and maybe also a bit for our discussion already. The first one is, again, something very much in line with what Yanis has explained. I think we need to invest more to understand better how this threat is working. Our situational awareness is still relatively low, and I think all of us here, professionals, need to constantly and continuously learn what is the issue, who are the actors, what is the behavior, what is the content also used, what is the effect. I think these are crucial elements, and we need to be really on top of the issue. And then, of course, we need to build our own resilience. And that resilience will not be easily done or easily achieved with just 1 or 2 policy areas. We need to think many policy areas together. Media policy, education policy, sometimes also foreign and security policy, and certainly the issues that we talk about here, also improving our ability to communicate strategically. And then something we have not talked about is, of course, also the role of social media. I think the president talked about this. There are issues around this, that we need to have a clearer set of rules of the game. But we need to be careful. We should not regulate the content, in particular if it's not an illegal content. But we need to have more responsibility, more transparency, and more accountability of the social media companies. I think this is exactly also what is happening here. And last but not least, let's also think about international cooperation in this field. How do we work together? And maybe also, what are the rules of the game internationally? I think this is really important. We don't have any international norms in this field, and it would be good to think about what is responsible state behavior in that field. Thank you, Murat. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Lutz, for this insight, especially about the social media marketing and then the companies, again, which was addressed today in the opening session. And then we go to Riga. The next speaker is Rihards Bambals from Latvia. He's a career diplomat with 11 years of experience in foreign and security policy. He is currently the head of strategic commissions at the State Chancellery. His doctoral thesis was about human security as a national interest in foreign policy, case analysis of Japan, Canada, and Norway. I guess it's quite an interesting one. And with this thesis, he was honored with the Award of the Year for Achievements in Science by the University of Latvia. So, Rihards, welcome again. If I may, how did you make use of communication strategies for reaching out to Latvian citizens? Would you call your strategies as convenient and effective enough?
Yes, hello, good morning, Murat and all the panelists. First, I think the question we should answer is why Latvia? What do we have to tell Turkey, and what do we have to tell the world in matters of strategic communications? And first, I think we have outlined that we have led the disinformation and misinformation since the restoration of independence 30 years ago. Secondly, I think small states such as Latvia often specialize in niche expertise which are useful for larger countries and international institutions such as the European Union and NATO. And third, I think it's also a matter of national security, which has to be protected in all domains, including not just land, sea, or air, but also cognitive warfare and our security in information domain. And having said that, I think Latvia has an excellent record of accomplishments. For example, in 2014, we established NATO's Stratcom Center of Excellence. You just heard from the director himself just an hour ago. A year later, in 2015, during Latvian presidency of the EU Council, we were the country that pushed for a more coherent and united EU's approach to respond to the threats of disinformation, and hence the establishment of the Stratcom task force. And since then, Latvia has always seconded experts to the international team. And last but not least, I think this year, 2021, Latvia was among the countries that spearheaded globally an initiative within the United Nations to adopt a General Assembly resolution on media and information literacy, which invites all UN countries to incorporate MIL in their policies and to do it every year end of October. So this brings me to Latvia in particularly now and during pandemic. My main thesis here I want to make is that when a crisis strikes, one is just as good as all the preparation work and all the instruments that have been developed in advance before the crisis. And here I think our model has been built on a whole of government and whole of society approach and developing resilience against such crises, including in information security domain. Moreover, my department, the time leading since September this year, Department of Strategic Communications, has been created right before, just a month or two before the crisis struck. And since then, the department has evolved and developed into a real institutionalized strategic communication capacity beneficial and used by all state institutions. And here I think maybe just a word to say what exactly do we do, and maybe it might be beneficial for others, this model of cooperation and work. First, we monitor constantly Latvia's information space, including social media, including disinformation narratives, hostile narratives. We cooperate closely with social media and tech companies. We are the national point of contact within Latvia on short line with Facebook, Google, and others. And we also do regular research and opinion polling, especially on COVID-19, which then feeds into the policy-making process, in decision-making process, be it Ministry of Health or the Vaccination Bureau or the government or the crisis team, which has also been created within the state chancellery and takes all the decisions related to the security measures on COVID-19 and vaccination. And moreover, we have a very important function of coordinating of joint messaging and actions across all ministries and government institutions in Latvia. For example, I lead myself personally every week weekly meetings between spokespersons, heads of communication departments of different ministries to convey the main messaging narratives on COVID, but also to exchange in a very focused way the main topics of the week in other domains as well. We also do strategic communication campaigns, including on COVID-19. We also created one special website, one-stop website, and one-stop phone line on COVID-19 questions, not just in Latvian, but also in Russian and English language, even though those are not state official languages. And we have also invested in building state and societal resilience by organizing different trainings, crisis simulations, even during the pandemic. The pandemic didn't stop the work, both for state officials, but also for municipalities, schools, and other actors. And here, just to finalize my intervention, I want to emphasize that we build all our work on strengthening and creating a healthy and secure information ecosystem based on three main principles. First principle is effective and timely communication between the state and its citizens, but this is just one part of three. Second is as important, which is qualitative and independent and safe media environment and actively engaged civil society, treating journalists as our friends, as our allies in the fight against pandemic, and not restricting their access to information. So we have also often organized cross-sectoral briefings with experts from different ministries right after different government meetings to explain in detail to journalists what has been taken, what kind of decisions have been taken, be it security related, be it vaccine related or other. And then the third element is building societal resilience by equipping all inhabitants with media and information literacy skills and critical thinking skills to be better able to counter disinformation, misinformation, information operations, and other hostilities?
Rihards, thank you so much for this insightful response answer. And now I turn to my next speaker, who is the young but quite an efficient officials at the Kosovo government, namely the spokesperson of the Kosovo government, Mr. Përparim Kryeziu. He is an experienced researcher with a demonstrated history of working in the think tank industry. He is quite skilled in statistical data analysis, where we will come in the second round. So welcome again, Përparim. So comparing other European countries, Kosovo attracts a specific attention with its quite low number of cases and death rates. I checked actually the statistics on 9th of December. I believe there was only 19 new cases and one death. So in what ways your communication strategies contribute to this favorable situation?
Well, let me start off by saying thank you for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure to be part of this panel with such distinguished guests and distinguished audience. I would like to take this opportunity to share some of my observations that have, I think, turned into lessons from my experience in the communications during the pandemic. This past year, I think, has been a true testimony how a proper communication at such a large scale of public health crisis can help contain a pandemic and save lives, or how an improper communication could negatively affect institutional efforts to fight and contain the virus. And I think that during this time, our governments have experienced one of the largest undertakings in mass communications. Now, as you mentioned, I think it's fair to say that Kosovo has been a successful story when it comes to managing a pandemic, both in the first round of the wave of the pandemic in the early March of 2020 up until June 2020, when Kosovo, in several cases, was mentioned as a successful story in containing the virus at a time where many of us had not much information on how to deal with it. And to this day, Kosovo remains a successful story with a very low number of cases, the lowest in the region, but at the same time, with the highest rate of vaccination in the region, with now around, if not over 60% of population of 16 years old or over getting vaccinated with 2 doses, and over 67% of the same group of population with at least 1 dose. And this has certainly helped in the low number of cases and low number of hospitalization, and most importantly, low number of deaths. Now, without going into the types of the restrictive measures that Kosovo has took, which of course were designed and proposed by health experts, supported and adopted by a government that believes in science, and implemented by attentive and responsible personnel of the respective authorities. I think that there are 3 things that made a massive impact on how we handled the pandemic from a communication perspective. The first one I would say was the public messaging and the breaking down of the public messaging into goal, objective ways and results. Obviously, the goal was pretty straightforward, at least at the beginning of the pandemic, and that is stopping the spread of the virus. The objective at the time was clear, and that was to flatten the curve. The ways, in addition to the restrictive measures, were the call for wearing a mask at all times, especially in indoors, washing your hands, keeping the hygiene, and minding your distance. And the results were the daily update of the new numbers of cases and those who have recovered and have left hospital, to sort of give people the impression of keeping track of their behavior. And this allowed, I think, that citizens to become much more responsible of their behavior and become active contributor in disseminating the message, being that the message was very clear and it was broken down into specific categories, and also become actively engaged in fighting the pandemic. The second, I think, is that we were very present in public as government officials via regular press conferences, media appearance, and other means of communications, leaving less to no room for conspiracy and disinformation, which has been something that I think every one of us, all institutions, have faced during this time. So we were available and accessible to the media. We treated media in a friendly way, and we were very prompt in addressing their concerns and misunderstanding. And also, we consciously expressed doses of vulnerability towards the fact that there are things that we don't have answers to, because there were still many unknowns. And I think that this gave the citizens the feeling of being part of something that we're all in together. And the third thing,
very quickly wrap up, because we have a
third thing is that we gave the floor and the spotlight to the medical experts in the public. Health professionals became the new celebrities in Kosovo. Basically, everybody knew them, and they quickly became the new figures of public authority when it came to discussing pandemic and clearing out any doubts about the true risks of the virus. And I think that these three things are just as valuable to any type of communication, even beyond and after such a health crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this insightful response, and congratulations for Kosovo, for the laureates. I hope it will continue like this. Now, we will move to the second part of our panel. Here in this part, speakers will have less time to speak, a little bit less, around 2 to 3 maximum. May I kindly request them to stay in their time limits. And then we will follow the reverse role. So I will start right now with Përparim, whose strong part, among others, or area of specialization, please correct me, is data analysis. So this reminds me of the following. The former British politician, Benjamin Disraeli, says, and I quote, "Lies, damn lies, and statistics." So it's a phrase describing the persuasive power of numbers. So through data analysis, we are able to turn our raw data into statistics that summarize what really happened. So from that perspective, can you evaluate the increasing role of data analysis in government communication?
Yes, well, as you mentioned, my academic background is in sociology, and in sociology often we try to explain and project social behaviors and social happenings based on empirical data. And I'm pleased to say that the new government of Kosovo aims to establish an evidence-based policymaking as a new norm of policy making. As you all know, policy making for a long time has often been based on ideology and what could be perceived as a common sense. But over time we have understood that policies often succeed on a particular time and context. And time and context could be determined or acknowledged based on the evidence and data that you have. And I think that the same logic applies to communication as well. Of course, you want your strategic communication to be based on data, because such data will assist you greatly in knowing and recognizing your audience, evaluating your performance, some of the things that have been said already during this summit and reshape accordingly. And that's very, very important. Now, it is unfortunate in the case of Kosovo, at least to the best of my knowledge, that communication offices within the government institutions, especially media or press offices, in the past, but currently as well, have not used data analysis as a way to upgrade and advance its communication. And this, of course, must change, and I am confident that this will change, especially given the fact that our government has its one of main objectives, the digitalization of services and data, and we are currently drafting our Digital Agenda 2030 that, in addition to providing electronic services, will certainly help us to build a large set of data base that could be used to monitor, evaluate, assess, and reshape our way of doing things and saying things.
Thank you so much. Now from the Balkans, we go to the Baltics. Next speaker on my list is Rihards, Bambals. We go again to Riga, Latvia. Rihards, this pandemic period created also new definitions. One of them is the social resilience or societal resilience. So what lessons can we derive from the pandemic in terms of societal resilience? What can be done to improve the response mechanisms of the societies against major threats? Because I know that this notion is closely related to capacity building. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And during catastrophic experiences, how societies tend to increase their resilience. For instance, I'm very much interested, do you have a to-do list in this respect?
Yes, thank you. From the outset of the COVID-19 crisis, already from the March 2020, I believe the World Health Organization coined the term also not only societal resilience, but also infodemia is the new term that came up with this crisis. And it was already from then identified as one of the key obstacles. And we have experienced in different ways, be it within the European Union at large or in Latvia in particularly, that infodemia has stopped people from wearing face masks. It has stopped people from taking the virus seriously initially, from following the safety and security measures put in place by the government. And once the vaccines have been developed, disinformation has hindered effective vaccine uptake by the population. So, and this coincides also with our research that we have done in 2020, where we learned actually that not that many people have good media and information literacy skills. And only one-fourth of the population at the time felt confident that they can distinguish real and factual information from fabricated and manipulated. So on the one hand, you have massive infodemia that accompanies the pandemic. And on the other hand, you have a vulnerable society, which is not properly equipped with media and information literacy skills, how to counter it. So, and then when we go more into depth, when we ask questions in opinion polls about COVID-19 and the obstacles, why people have delayed their vaccine uptake, why they don't vaccinate, then we realize that they repeat the same hostile disinformation or misinformation narratives that have been pushed our way, that the vaccines against COVID are not safe, that the government wants unnecessarily control people, that the government is inventing the COVID-19 numbers in the hospitals, or that they are inflated, that the virus is not dangerous, that it's even safer actually to contract the actual virus and to recover from it rather than to vaccinate it, and etc., etc. So we see that disinformation can actually have real health harm on people's lives and can create individual tragedies. But we have learned from this, and we tried actually something very interesting and very innovative. Just last month, for example, we combined the influencers, using influencers for campaigns, and we combined it with gamification. So what we did for the occasion of the Global Media and Information Literacy Week, starting 25th of October this year, we launched the Latvian adaptation of the world famous online game Go Viral. And everyone can actually go and play it on a webpage, goviralgame.com. And then you have at least 10 or 12 different languages, and Latvian now is one among them. And this is a game that is based on a pre-bunking or the inoculation theory, which means that players can learn about the techniques used by the manipulators in a safe environment in order to better recognize and counter real-life threats on social media next time when they see them. And we've seen this approach highly successful, both as a campaign by empowering local influencers and spreading the word about the game, and as well as the game numbers. And we see this as the future. And having said that, we'll be definitely prioritizing media and information literacy and critical thinking skills in our work as a government, as a government communicators, to make not just our state resilient, but also our society resilient and be better equipped, not just for the COVID, but also for other future crises and in the future as well.
Thank you so much, Rihards, for enlightening us about your government's efforts on social resilience. Is it, by the way, social resilience or societal resilience from the grammar point of view?
It's societal. It's
societal.
Whole of society approach.
Thank you.
As I said.
Thank you so much. And now we go again to Brussels, to European Union. Lutz is on my right, actually. Lutz, actually, due to current reach of social media, the risk of fake news being disseminated in greater than ever. If you were able to follow the keynote speech of Professor Altun, Director of Communications of Presidency, he touched upon this in his great part of his speech. So this is actually a headache for Turkey as well. Turkey is a case in point, and we are acting shoulder to shoulder with Directorate of Communications against disinformation activities. As I said, for societal societal resilience, pandemic created also another term which could be applicable to your response, namely infodemics, information and epidemics that created infodemics, a kind of pollution, fake news, disinformation, misinformation. So my question will be, in which ways government communication can play a role to increase population resilience to disinformation and decrease their susceptibility to fake news?
Thank you, Murat. I think that this is a crucial role for government communications. But let me take a step back, because what we see nowadays in our societies and also on social media, for example, are different phenomena at the same time. We see a lot of information confusion. Some people call it also junk news. These are kind of false or also sometimes quite bizarre stories, but that are shared without any intention to mislead. So it's really about kind of an information confusion, if you want. And in that field, it's extremely important to think about education. It's important to think about what government communications can also be to provide kind of at least hooks, references, etc. And kind of the more proactive going out there. But at the same time, we have another phenomenon, and that is disinformation in the sense of deliberately misleading of something that is coordinated, that has a very intentional perspective as well, very often for political aims, sometimes also for economic aims. And I think the second part requires a different answer. It also requires governments to go in, but then we also come to the point of how much can we invest into not only societal resilience, a concept that is also very dear to our approach, but also where can we set the rules of the game, you know, for the actors in this area. And I think in both of these phenomena, misinformation and disinformation, the role of governments is quite important, but not so much to tell the truth, because I think that would be important. That would be quite dangerous, because because then the government sees itself as the holder of the truth, but as an honest moderator, as somebody a little bit like in consumer protection that allows consumers to find trustworthy sources of information. And how do we do this? Basically, three elements that come together. The first one is we need to define the rules of the game for the overall context.
Thank you so much. Now I turn to Russia again. Vladimir, Gushchin has to be the next speaker. So Vladimir, we witnessed that nearly all the governments have been compelled to reconsider, because this is the name of our panel, Rethinking Government Communications. So governments have been compelled to reconsider their development strategies, prioritizing sustainability and the measures to be taken against potential new pandemics. So what can we expect in this respect for the future?
Thanks a lot for the question, Mr. Ambassador. And I think that everything that is going on right now, it's not only about the pandemic, but also various challenges in the social, economic world, global information challenges, and all others. So they force the government, and it's not about Russia, it's about all other countries as well, to invent new tools, how to make all the processes of communication more transparent. And I think that is the only way to provide more efficiency to the process of solving the problems. So, transparency of information, focus on public interests, and that is what we see here in Russia. I work closely with the Premier's office and with various ministries, and I see that recently, in the last several years, we started more carefully talking to we started talking to each other, to various NGOs, and involve people in taking the decisions. I think this is the key criteria of success: how people are involved in government politics, in social economic issues, first of all. And of course, as Mr. Bambals said already on this panel, one of the main issues is the societal resilience to government efforts, not taken only for the sake of the government itself. That's very important, to make people understand that what is introduced by the government is a measure that is aimed at solving the problems, and not at defending the government's stance on this or that issue. So the word transparency, that is the key word for success. I think so.
Thank you so much, Vladimir. Now, slowly we are finishing the second round and the panel as well. The last speaker is again in the hall at the end of this row, Raun again. So as I was introducing him, I said that he was a wonderful combination of music, PR, and communications. So besides culture and music, he also dealt for a while in tourism. And I guess that tourism is quite important for my country as well. So tourism has a significant contribution to economics. I checked the figures. Please correct me if I'm wrong. 7.8% of the GDP of Estonia comes from tourism revenues. This is huge. I mean, Turkey is also a tourist-attracted country. Antalya, as a case in point, is a population of 2 million, attracts every year 12 million tourists. So governments tried to reduce the destructive impacts of pandemic on tourism. So we have taken in this respect, for instance, as the government of Turkey, a lot of measures. health certificate. As you see, as you stay here in your hotels in Istanbul, you may see that they are all tested and certified by independent companies. So when I say tourism, I also refer to culture partially as well. So they both go hand in hand. So I was wondering your thoughts on this very concrete aspect.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely, culture and tourism have the same fate, I should say, that these sectors have to face the restrictions in longest run, dropping first out and getting last into the everyday business. And yes, definitely, both tourism and culture are very important for your country as well as for Estonia. I really like this same example which you brought, that we have very positive example of building trust in Istanbul, because also this hotel where I'm staying has the safe tourism certificate, which is issued just for 1 month. So that means that there is a need of building trust regularly, again and again, to show the standard. And that's a very positive example, which gives like a micro-level hint for us, which we have to do it in the future. So actually, every family, company and organization has to ensure the safety, and actually we have the same question which we had for centuries, during a very long time. The first question for everyone is, are we safe enough? So culture and tourism definitely are the very vulnerable sectors which depend strongly on the level of trust in society and between people, and also the main task of strategic communication in that context is to restore and to build trust between people, the organizations and also nations. Because we all have gone through this hard period of lockdown, and we all the time facing some kind of elements of the restrictions, so trust have to be kept up. And first, let's say there are some trends. When it became clear that the pandemics will last longer than a year, many professionals, maybe about 1/3 part, in the field of culture and also in tourism, at least in Estonia, began to search for other jobs and reorientate themselves to other sectors. So they are lost for these sectors. Not all of them maybe, but a lot of them. Second, many young talents will not take the risk anymore to be the part of those vulnerable sectors. They choose other profession and other school. So maybe if they cannot follow the real passion to be in the midst of culture and tourism, we lose their actual potential to create masterpieces of culture. And the third trend I will point out is a growing number of companies and institutions worldwide will close their activities. So indeed, this process has just begun actually, and it will have direct negative impact to our economies. So can it be avoided? It seems that not anymore. But can we do anything? Yes, we can. We can help to keep in shape the existing connections between the people and creating the new ones, and this quantity of different kind of human relations will turn into quality. So more relations, more trust. And with a higher level of trust, we can overcome all these versions of crisis we have faced during this hard period. First, crisis of healthcare, crisis of leadership, and also crisis of communication.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm quite happy because, as a side note, before we start this panel, I had a phone conversation with Eero. You remember you had some little bit resentment to come because of these conditions. I'm so happy that you made. I hope that you're quite happy to be in Istanbul right now and enjoy the city and see also the necessary, health measures taken by them. So slowly we come to the end to our panel. So I believe that it was an informative, colorful and fruitful discussion. I hope that you all enjoyed. And we were all informed about how governments communicate with their citizens during this challenging period. We talked about some best practices, as we talk about great challenges as well. And I guess we can say quite that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, although a lot of similarities in terms of measures. We will also discuss able to discuss different areas like development strategy, disinformation, cultural context, societal resilience, and data analysis. So I sincerely thank our panelists for sharing their time and candid opinion on this very relevant topic, both who showed up here in Istanbul and the others who were connected through VTC. I thank you all for your patience, and I convey my best wishes and gratitude to the Directorate of Communications for giving me this opportunity, and this concludes our panel. Thank you.